What did your babysitter do on camera? I'll never forget the night my parents came home from their wedding trip and discovered the shocking footage from the nanny cam in their bedroom. It all started when they decided to hire the regular babysitter to watch my younger siblings overnight, since they didn't think my elderly grandfather was up for the task. My parents had set up motion-activated cameras in several rooms, just to keep an eye on things while they were away. They usually didn't bother checking the footage unless something seemed amiss when they got back. But on this night, the camera in the master bedroom had been triggered. Curious, my parents sat down to review the footage. What they saw next left them stunned. There was my 70-year-old grandfather locked in a passionate embrace with the 20-year-old babysitter. The two of them staggered towards the bed, their clothes quickly discarded, before tumbling onto the mattress in a frenzy of tangled limbs. My dad immediately called me, his laughter barely containing his disbelief. In the background, I could hear my mom's mortified cries as she demanded that my dad throw out the sheets and kick Grandpa out of the house. When my mom confronted the babysitter, the girl just apologized, saying there was some kind of connection between her and Grandpa. And when asked, Grandpa simply shrugged and said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." Story 2. My family got a special camera so we could check in on our dogs whenever we went on vacation a couple times a year. We figured it would be great to be able to see and even talk to them, though we actually didn't use it all that much. One time, though, we asked our longtime maid to come dog sit for us while we were away. And when we pulled up the camera feed, we got the sweetest surprise. There was the maid, already at our house and just spending quality time with our pups. She was sitting on the floor, petting them and playing with them, even though she wasn't supposed to be there for another half hour. It was just the cutest thing. Our maid has since retired, but she was always such a kind, gentle soul. Seeing her dote on our dogs like that, even when she didn't have to, just warmed our hearts. We could tell she really cared about those pups. Story 3. My neighbor once told me that he'd seen my pet bunnies roaming around the neighborhood a few times. I didn't believe him at first, but then I decided to check the security cameras we have set up around the outside of our house. Sure enough, one day while I was at work, I noticed the gate to the backyard was slightly open on the camera feed. So I rewound the footage to see what happened. It turned out that in the morning before I left for work, my wife had gone out to feed the bunnies. After she went back inside and drove away, the clever little guys peeked around the side of the house, waited until the coast was clear, and then pushed hard enough on the gate to pop the latch open. One by one, they slipped out and went on an adventure. Later in the day, before I got home, the bunnies would make their way back and close the gate behind them. These were some smart, mischievous little creatures. I couldn't believe they had figured out how to orchestrate their own great escape. Needless to say, I didn't waste any time fixing that weak latch on the gate after that. No more Houdini bunnies on my watch. Story 4. Many years ago, a family I knew hired a full-time babysitter to care for their young child. Over time, they started noticing that their kid was having a really hard time sleeping and would have intense fits right before bedtime. The parents couldn't figure out what was causing this troubling behavior. Eventually, they decided to set up a hidden nanny camera to try and get to the bottom of it. And when they reviewed the footage, they were absolutely horrified by what they saw. Whenever the child wouldn't fall asleep right away or got a bit fussy during nap time, the nanny would physically beat him to make him sleep. This was back in the early 2000s, when nanny cams were still a relatively new technology. The family even got fined for having the audio recording, since they lived in a state that required all parties to consent to being recorded. But despite the legal issues, I'm so glad they had that camera set up, because who knows how long the abuse could have continued otherwise. Story 5. As someone who travels a lot for work, I'm really fortunate that I'm able to bring my 2 beagle dogs with me on my trips. They've never been away from my side for longer than the time I'm at work, and they're quite the pair, 10 and 13 years old. I have a camera set up to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the clever and curious guy. He's figured out how to open doors, scoot chairs over so he can jump up onto the counters, and all sorts of other mischievous stunts. Last year, I had to go home to Michigan from Oregon for an emergency, and I didn't want to fly the dogs with me. So I reluctantly hired someone from Rover to come stay in my hotel room and watch them for a few days. I was a bit nervous, but this woman ended up being absolutely amazing. Not only did she keep me updated with regular texts about the dogs, saying things like, "Just toss them a ball," but when I checked the camera feed, I was blown away. She wasn't just playing with them, she was teaching them new tricks, and even getting my 42-pound beagle to do push-ups on her back. Turns out she was an avid CrossFitter. The dogs were totally exhausted by the time I got back, but in the best way. I could tell they'd been getting plenty of physical and mental stimulation. Before delving into the next regrettable recap, please remember to like and subscribe if you'd like us to create more of this content. Thank you. Story 6. My mom had been suspicious of our maid for a while, thinking she was taking some of our silverware. My mom is a pretty nosy person, so she decided to set up a hidden camera to see what the maid was up to. Turns out, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. But that wasn't even the most surprising thing that happened. It seemed my dad had also been getting a bit too friendly with the maid. He got caught in the act on the camera footage. That whole situation was just a crazy mess. Story 7. My aunt's friend had started to notice something strange happening with her child. Whenever the nanny would change the baby's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Concerned, the parents decided to set up a hidden camera to see what was going on. When they reviewed the footage, they were shocked by what they saw. Turns out, the nanny was using Clorox wipes to clean the baby instead of the gentler baby wipes. No wonder the child was so upset during diaper changes. The parents immediately fired the nanny as soon as they discovered this. They were livid that someone entrusted to care for their child would do something so careless and potentially harmful. After that incident, the father decided to become a stay-at-home dad so he could keep a close eye on the baby himself. Story 8. You'd think setting up a wildlife camera in your demented great-grandmother's apartment would be a bit of an overreaction, but that's exactly what my uncle decided to do. You see, Grandma had been telling us all these bizarre stories about people breaking in and stealing her snacks and liquor. We figured she was just imagining things due to her dementia. Turns out, Grandma's other son, my shady uncle, who we'd all lost contact with years ago, had a key to the apartment, and he was regularly slipping in at midnight to swipe some of Grandma's jewelry. The whole situation was just wild. We'd had no idea Uncle Shady was still keeping tabs on Grandma and helping himself to her belongings. And to think, Grandma had been taking the blame for his thievery the whole time. Story 9. When I was just a kid, attending what was basically the preschool equivalent, we started noticing some alarming changes in our classmates. All the children were suddenly regressing in their motor skills and packing on the pounds at a concerning rate. It was a real head-scratcher. The teachers decided to get to the bottom of it, so they set up hidden cameras to monitor the classroom. And boy, did they uncover a shocking discovery. Turns out, one of the caregivers was deliberately doubling the food portions for each and every child. She was forcefully overfeeding the kids, completely disregarding their needs and well-being. It was a complete abuse of her position of trust. Story 10. I count myself lucky that I stopped babysitting before nanny cams became the norm. There was one couple I used to sit for that had the cutest kids, but their house had a dirty little secret. A whole room devoted to the dad's model railroad obsession. I'm talking dozens of trains, bridges, tiny villages, the whole 9 yards. It was like a miniature wonderland, and I'll admit, I couldn't resist the temptation to play with it during those long, boring stretches between the kids' bedtime and the parents coming home. I'd just sit there, mesmerized, carefully moving the trains along the tracks, rearranging the little buildings and people. It was like stepping into my own private fantasy world, if only for a little while. The only real downside was that I couldn't indulge my inner train conductor and blow the horns. That would have surely blown my cover and gotten me caught red-handed. As much as I loved messing around with that intricate model railroad, I knew I had to be on my best behavior. Those poor kids. If they'd caught wind of what I was up to, they would have been devastated. Story 11. Looking back, I'm actually kind of glad my parents caught the babysitter in a rather unusual act. It may have seemed a bit strange at first, but in hindsight, it was actually pretty adorable. My parents had hired this sitter to watch over our 60-pound golden retriever while they were out for the evening. When they returned home, they found the sitter cradling the big pup in her arms, rocking him gently like a baby. Apparently, our fluffy friend had wormed his way into the sitter's heart, and she just couldn't resist giving him some extra cuddles. I mean, who could blame her? Our golden is such a lovable goofball. That's not the only time we've caught someone doting on our pets either. One time, our building's maintenance guy was spotted spooning with our 130-pound Mastiff on the living room floor. The big guy must have worked his charm because the maintenance man looked perfectly content, cuddled up with our gentle giant. Story 12. I can still remember that day vividly, even though I was just a kid at the time. My parents had to work late, so they hired a babysitter to watch over me while they were gone. They left a whole bucket of toys and activities to keep me entertained, but the sitter had other plans. Instead of letting me play with my toys, she moved the whole bucket to another room and put me in my crib. Then she just went off, leaving me there for hours on end with nothing to do. The sitter would only come back occasionally to feed me or make sure I was still there. When my parents finally returned home, they found me just sitting sadly in my crib, all alone. I must have looked so dejected, with no toys or games to keep me occupied. My parents were instantly furious. They couldn't believe the sitter had just abandoned me like that. I felt so neglected and bored, stuck in that crib for what felt like an eternity. All I wanted was to play with my toys, but that mean old sitter had taken them away. It was such a lonely and frustrating experience, just sitting there waiting for my parents to come back. Story 13. There was one time when I was really in a pinch for a babysitter. All the regular sitters were booked, and I had no choice but to hire someone who had a bit of a notorious reputation in the neighborhood. You know the type. Not dangerous, but maybe not the most attentive or nurturing with the kids. I'll admit, I was really suspicious the whole time I was away. I just couldn't stop myself from constantly glancing at the baby cam, worried about how things were going. But to my surprise, the sitter was absolutely wonderful with my little one. Instead of ignoring the child or being short-tempered, like I'd heard she could be, this sitter was fully engaged. She was playing games, singing songs, and giving my baby all the loving attention I could have asked for. It was the complete opposite of the sitter's supposed reputation. When I finally got home, I was floored. I immediately gave the sitter a huge tip and made a mental note to request her services again whenever I needed a babysitter. Clearly, whatever rumors were circulating about her weren't accurate at all. Story 14. I work as a nanny for this family, and they told me some wild stuff about their last babysitter. They caught her doing tons of awful things on their home cameras. Two of these really shocked me. The first big no-no was about bath time. Every single day, this babysitter would put their 3-year-old daughter in the bathtub with deep water, up to the kid's chest. Then, get this, she'd leave the little girl there for 2 whole hours. The babysitter would just chill in another room where she couldn't even see the child. Can you imagine how dangerous that is? The poor kid could have slipped under the water at any moment. The second crazy thing happened when the babysitter took the same little girl on a quick trip. The family's doorbell camera caught everything. It showed the babysitter putting the toddler in the car seat, but she didn't bother buckling her in at all. Then she zoomed off like she was in a race. The video even showed the little girl trying to reach for her own buckles as they drove away. That's super scary and so unsafe. Story 15. As a regular weekend nanny for this amazing family, I've seen them go through a few different weekday caregivers over the years. There's only one security monitor set up, and it's in the little guy's room. One day, the mom showed me some footage from that camera that explained why they had to let a previous nanny go. Let me tell you, what I saw on that video was absolutely heartbreaking. The nanny was interacting with the child in the most inappropriate, unacceptable way. She was berating him, speaking to him so harshly, and even physically manhandling the poor kid. It was gut-wrenching to witness. In the video, the little boy said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that." And the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy is a bitch." Then she pulled the boy out of the room by his shirt. She was fired right away. Story 16. I'll never forget the case I saw on TV about those poor parents and their baby. They had taken their little girl to the doctor because she was just crying inconsolably with no clear medical reason. The doctor noticed the baby seemed incredibly stressed and asked the parents if they were doing anything that could be causing that. The parents swore up and down they were doing nothing out of the ordinary, but the doctor kept pressing. That's when they all noticed these tiny little marks on the baby's belly. None of us had any idea where they could have come from. The babysitter claimed she had no idea what could have caused those mysterious injuries. But the parents didn't believe her for a second. They decided to set up hidden cameras to monitor the sitter's interactions with their child. And what those cameras captured was absolutely horrifying. The footage showed the babysitter deliberately harming that poor baby, stabbing her with a needle and shaking the crib violently, just to torment the child. I can only imagine the shock and anguish those parents must have felt, realizing the person they trusted was abusing their little girl. As soon as they saw what was happening, the parents called the police right away. They confronted the babysitter, who was then promptly arrested for her heinous actions. I'm so relieved the parents acted quickly to put a stop to that abuse before it escalated even further. Story 17. I'll never forget the day I came home early and uncovered the awful truth about our nanny. For a while, my sister and I had been acting strangely after spending the day with her. We just never seemed to sleep at all. Something felt off, so I decided to head home unexpectedly one afternoon. What I found when I got there still haunts me. There were my poor kids, both completely passed out in their beds in the middle of the day. It was so unnatural, and my motherly instincts immediately went into high alert. After some investigation, the horrifying reality came to light. That nanny had been secretly drugging my little ones with some kind of sleep medication, just so she could sit around and do nothing all day while they were unconscious. I was absolutely sickened and heartbroken to discover she had been harming my babies in that way. The violation of trust was devastating. I had entrusted this person to care for my children, and instead she was betraying that trust in the most despicable manner possible. Knowing she had been intentionally sedating my kids to avoid her duties, it made my blood boil. Story 18. My parents didn't have a special camera to watch the babysitter, but my mom decided to set up her old video camera just in case. She thought the babysitter might be taking things from our house, and boy was she right. When my mom reviewed the footage, she couldn't believe her eyes. There was the babysitter rummaging through our drawers and pocketing some of our valuables. I guess she thought she could get away with it, but my mom wasn't having it. She confronted the babysitter right away and threatened to call the cops if she didn't return everything. The babysitter got really nervous and ended up giving most of the stuff back. I think she realized she'd really messed up this time, but who knows, she might have just gone on to steal from other families after that. Story 19. There was this case that happened near where I live. A woman who worked during the day hired a nanny to take care of her 2-year-old son while she was at work. Over time, the little boy started looking thinner and not as healthy as he should be. The mom decided to set up a hidden camera to see what was going on, and boy was she shocked by what she saw. The nanny would bring her own kid with her and feed him all the good food that was meant for the little boy she was supposed to be watching. Instead, she'd just give the kid some cheap plain biscuits. Story 20. My family decided to set up a hidden camera to keep an eye on my elderly grandfather, especially when the home health aides were there to help take care of him. We were starting to notice some concerning things. My grandpa was asking for a lot of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A special brooch that was supposed to go to my aunt went missing, and we heard reports of him being inappropriate with some of the aides. When we reviewed the footage from the nanny cam, it all made sense. We caught my grandfather squirreling away his medication instead of taking it, giving money to one of the aides, and even sexually harassing another one. It was heartbreaking to see him behaving that way. Story 21. My story might not be the most exciting one, but I do have a camera set up to keep an eye on my pet rabbit when I'm not home. The biggest surprises I've gotten from the camera were usually just seeing how hardly anyone followed the instructions I left for pet sitters. The one exception to that, though, was actually my own brother. He's always pretended to dislike my rabbit and said he wanted to get rid of it. But one day, when he was supposed to be watching the little guy, I got an alert from the camera that it had detected movement. I decided to check the camera feed, and when I did, I saw the sweetest thing. My brother had walked into my room, laid down on the floor, and started playing with the rabbit. He was petting it, talking to it, and just hanging out. It totally warmed my heart to see him being so gentle and caring, even though he always acts like he can't stand the rabbit. Thanks for listening to these regrettable recaps. Now it's time for the Today I Fucked Up stories. Please like and subscribe if you'd like more of this content in the future. The day my baby daughter outsmarted me. Picture this. It's a sunny morning and I'm home alone with my 9-month-old daughter. My wife's away on a training course, leaving me as the chief babysitter, a term that never fails to annoy her when I use it. There I am, sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by a sea of toys. My daughter, ever the curious explorer, is digging through her bag. To my surprise, she pulls out a pair of headphones. Now, being the attentive father I am, I keep a close eye on her as she plays with them. After all, we can't have her getting tangled up, can we? As she tosses the headphones around, I notice she's now chewing on something. Alarm bells start ringing in my head. I reach into her mouth and pull out a small rubber earbud tip. Panic sets in as I realize these aren't my safe rubber-free Apple earphones. No, these are my wife's Samsung ones with those pesky removable tips. I frantically search for the other tip, but it's nowhere to be found. My daughter sits there, grinning at me like she's just pulled off the heist of the century. In my mind, there's only one explanation. She must have swallowed it. Like any modern parent, I turn to Dr. Google for advice. But as we all know, Google has a knack for turning a simple headache into a brain tumor diagnosis. In this case, it's suggesting my daughter needs an X-ray, stat. The fact that she's coughing a little only fuels my paranoia. I've practically diagnosed her with rubber-swallowed death syndrome at this point. Living in the UK, where healthcare won't bankrupt you, I decide to err on the side of caution. I scoop up my daughter and make the short walk to the Andy department of our local hospital. The receptionist tries to reassure me, but agrees to have a doctor check her out. After a nerve-wracking wait, the doctor tells me not to worry but to keep an eye on her. Relieved but still anxious, we make our way home. And that's when I see it. The missing earbud tip, innocently lying on the floor where my daughter had tossed it earlier. She hadn't swallowed it at all. To add insult to injury, my little trickster immediately tries to grab the earbud tip again, ready for round 2 of Let's Give Daddy a Heart Attack. So there you have it. The day I rushed my daughter to the hospital over a piece of rubber that was in our living room the whole time. Parenthood, eh? It's full of surprises, most of them courtesy of your own overactive imagination, and a baby who's clearly going to grow up to be a master of mischief. The day I accidentally played Cupid for my teenage son. Picture this. I'm a mother of 2 boys, ages 16 and 8, and I thought I had it all figured out. Little did I know that my attempt to outsmart teenage hormones would lead to an unexpected twist in our family dynamics. It all started when my husband and I needed to be away from home on a Friday night. Normally, our 16-year-old would watch his younger brother, but he had soccer practice until late. So I found myself in need of a babysitter. Now, being the clever mom I thought I was, I decided to hire a male sitter. My reasoning? Well, let's just say I wasn't ready to risk becoming a grandmother before hitting 50. I mean, my genes are pretty good. My older son is quite the handsome lad, if I do say so myself. So, no girls allowed. I turned to the school's list of teens available for odd jobs and found the perfect candidate. A friendly young man, a grade below my son, with glowing references. I patted myself on the back for my brilliant plan and left for my night out, confident all would be well. Fast forward to Saturday morning, and I walk into a scene straight out of the Twilight Zone. My teenage son, the one who considers noon early on weekends, was awake at 7 a.m. I hadn't seen him up this early since he was 10. But that wasn't the strangest part. The air was thick with something. Both boys were acting weird, like they couldn't decide if they wanted to talk to each other or run away. And was that blushing I saw? I brushed it off, chalking it up to teenage awkwardness. Days passed, and I started noticing changes. My son, usually glued to his phone texting, was now having long conversations. And that name I kept hearing? It belonged to our one-time babysitter. Now, I've never gotten the vibe that my son might be gay, but hey, anything's possible, right? And while I'm not keen on learning the details, I'm pretty sure something happened that night between them. So here I am, realizing that my master plan to prevent teenage romance under my roof may have backfired spectacularly. Instead of preventing a potential girlfriend situation, I might have just played accidental matchmaker for my son and his new boyfriend. Talk about a plot twist. I guess the moral of the story is, when it comes to matters of the heart, even the most well-intentioned parental schemes can lead to surprising outcomes. Who knew that in trying to outsmart teenage hormones, I'd end up with front row seats to an unexpected love story? Only time will tell how this all plays out, but one thing's for sure. Parenting never ceases to surprise me. And who knows, maybe I'll look back on this one day and laugh at how my brilliant plan turned me into an accidental cupid for my own son, the night I became the world's worst babysitter. Have you ever had one of those nights where everything that could go wrong did go wrong? Well, let me tell you about the Saturday night that turned me into a cautionary tale for babysitters everywhere. It started innocently enough. I was watching 6-year-old Sean, and we were having a grand old time with Looney Tunes and freezer pizza. As bedtime rolled around, I helped the little guy brush his teeth, blissfully unaware of the chaos about to unfold. That's when the pizza decided to wage war on my insides. I quickly ushered Sean out of the bathroom and braced myself for what can only be described as a biblical event. The aftermath was so bad, I half expected to see 4 horsemen ride out of the toilet bowl. In a desperate attempt to mask the unholy stench, I unleashed a cloud of Axe body spray that would make a middle school locker room smell like a field of daisies. Crisis averted, right? Wrong. As I was basking in my air-freshening victory, I spotted a pair of black lingerie panties hanging over the shower curtain. Being the considerate babysitter I thought I was, I decided to put them away. But as I grabbed them, horror struck. They were wet, and not just damp from the shower wet. They had a distinct odor. Panicking, I dashed to the master bedroom to hide the evidence, but Sean intercepted me, asking for his stuffed monkey. In a moment of pure genius, or so I thought, I shoved the panties into what I assumed was the underwear drawer and tossed Sean's monkey into his room with a cheerful, think fast. Cue the blood-curdling shriek. I rushed to Sean's room to find the wet panties had somehow landed on his face. Smooth move, right? Desperate to calm him down, I promised ice cream if he stopped crying. There was just one tiny problem. Sean wasn't allowed sugar, and there was no ice cream in the house. No worries, I thought. There's a store just down the block. I'll be back before he knows it. I scribbled down my number for Sean and made a dash for the store. Minutes later, I was strutting back, Victory ice cream in hand, when I saw it, the parents' car in the driveway. My heart stopped. I opened the front door to a scene straight out of a nightmare. There was Sean, sobbing and clutching the soiled panties, with his bewildered parents staring at me. The babysitter with ice cream smeared across my face. In a moment of pure panic, I turned and fled. But then I remembered, my childhood stuffed monkey was still inside.
So I mustered every ounce of courage I had and did the walk of shame back to the house. I pried my beloved monkey from Sean's grip and made my final exit, never to babysit again. How I accidentally turned two 7-year-old girls into war game enthusiasts. Let me set the scene. I'm an 18-year-old guy with about as much childcare experience as a pet rock. Sure, I can handle boys, chuck them a Nerf gun or fire up Mario Kart, and you're golden. But girls, that's a whole different ballgame.
So there I am, minding my own business, deep into a tank combat game, when my door bursts open. In walks our family friend's dad with his two 7-year-old girls in tow. Before I can even blink, he's asking if I can watch them while the adults go for drinks. And because I'm clearly a glutton for punishment, I say yes. Did I mention I'm not even getting paid for this? For the next hour, I'm like a desperate cruise ship director trying to keep these kids entertained. We go through every toy in the house, but nothing sticks. These girls have the attention span of goldfish on espresso.
Just as I'm about to admit defeat, one of them asks about the game I was playing when they arrived. I mentioned the tank combat game, fully expecting them to lose interest immediately. Boy, was I wrong. Suddenly, I'm setting up my laptop on the TV, giving a crash course in virtual warfare to 2-pint-sized recruits. And let me tell you, these girls took to it like ducks to water. If ducks were bloodthirsty little warmongers. The living room turns into a battleground. They're screaming, laughing, and blowing up everything in sight. Are there bigger guns? Can we get a bigger tank? More targets? It's like I've unleashed tiny Rambos in pigtails. When their parents finally return, the girls rush to greet them, bursting with excitement. Dad, we blew up so many guys. I destroyed like 10 tanks. I watch as the color drains from their father's face. He looks at me like I've corrupted his precious angels. What could I say? I just shrugged and mumbled something about not denying children the experience of defeating Nazis. Smooth, right? The kicker? I later found out that not only was the dad not mad, but apparently I'm now the girl's favorite babysitter. Who knew that a little virtual carnage was the key to winning over the under 10 crowd? The Tinder date that turned me into an unwitting babysitter. Ever had a day start off normal and end up like a scene from a bad comedy? Buckle up, folks, because I'm about to take you on a wild ride through the worst Tinder date in the history of bad decisions. It all began on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I was in my old college town, killing time while waiting for my buddies to return from their dirt biking adventure. Bored out of my mind, I made the fateful decision to open Tinder. Little did I know, I was about to swipe right into chaos. Within minutes, I matched with a girl who messaged me immediately. Hey, I don't normally do this, but you're really cute. Let's hang out. Now, I'm usually the type to get to know someone before meeting up, but boredom and curiosity got the better of me. What's the worst that could happen, right? Oh, sweet summer child, if only I knew. She invited me to meet her at a bar downtown at 1 p.m. on a Saturday. Red flag number 1, but who was I to judge? I arrived to find her already several drinks deep. She greeted me by slamming 2 more drinks, planting a big kiss on my lips, and dragging me over to meet her entire family, who were apparently celebrating a casino win. Before I could process what was happening, she vanished onto the dance floor, leaving me with her siblings. One of them ordered 2 shots, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You're with Tiffany? Good luck, buddy," before downing both shots and disappearing into the crowd.
That's when all hell broke loose. Tiffany got into a full-blown fistfight over a spilled drink. The bouncers literally threw her out of the bar. Her family disowned her on the spot and left her crying on the curb.
At this point, any sane person would have run for the hills. But no, my misguided sense of decency kicked in. I couldn't leave this mess of a human being alone in her state. So began my unexpected role as a babysitter to a very drunk, very upset stranger. What followed was a nightmarish odyssey through town. Tiffany alternated between puking, passing out, and giving me vague directions to her home. My truck became a mobile vomitorium as we drove in circles for over an hour. Finally, she pointed to a house and mumbled, "That one." Relieved, I carried her inside and set her up on the couch with water, a bucket, and a blanket. Mission accomplished, right? Wrong. The next morning, I got a furious call from Tiffany. Turns out, in her drunken state, she had directed me to the home of her ex-fiancé and ex-best friend, who had run off together 2 years prior. They came home to find a stranger passed out on their couch, surrounded by puke. Talk about an awkward reunion. The kiss that changed everything. A cautionary tale for new parents. As a new parent, you're constantly learning. Sometimes those lessons come at a heavy cost. This is the story of how a single, seemingly innocent act of affection led to a harrowing medical ordeal for my newborn daughter. It was just over a week ago. Our baby girl was 7.5 weeks old, healthy and thriving. In a moment of pure love, I kissed the top of her head. It was a light kiss, barely a peck really, on her thick head of hair. But there was one crucial detail I overlooked. I had a cold sore on my lip. We've always been cautious about cold sores. We have a strict no kissing on the lips or face rule for our children, knowing that cold sores are caused by the herpes simplex virus, HSV1. But I never imagined that a kiss on the top of the head could pose a risk. Within 48 hours, our world turned upside down. Our baby developed sores where I had kissed her. At first, we weren't sure what they were. We took her to a walk-in clinic, then to our family doctor. As the sores spread across her forehead, our worry grew. Finally, we ended up in the Children's Hospital emergency room. After a battery of tests and an agonizing wait, we received the diagnosis. Our baby had contracted HSV1. The virus I've lived with since childhood, the one that causes my occasional cold sores, had been transmitted to our newborn through that single kiss. The doctors explained that she would need at least a week of intravenous antiviral medication. They told us about the potential complications, how herpes in infants can lead to serious issues like blindness or brain damage, and can even be fatal if left untreated. As I sit here in the hospital, watching my tiny daughter hooked up to IVs, I'm overwhelmed with regret. I had no idea that HSV1 could spread through skin contact, or that kissing a baby anywhere could be so dangerous. I wish I had known then what I know now. But amidst the guilt and fear, there's also gratitude. We caught it early. Our daughter was otherwise healthy, giving her a better chance at fighting this. And by sharing our story, we hope to raise awareness and possibly prevent other families from going through this ordeal. To all the new parents out there, please be cautious. Even if you don't have visible cold sores, the virus can still spread. Consider avoiding kissing your newborn, especially in the first few months. And if you do have a history of cold sores, talk to your doctor about precautions you can take. The day I accidentally taught my toddler to catcall. You know how they say kids are like sponges, soaking up everything around them? Well, let me tell you a story about the day I learned just how true that is, and how a harmless compliment to my husband turned into a week-long comedy of errors. It all started on a regular Tuesday. I was out running errands with my 2 boys, ages 1 and 3. We had some time to kill, and my older son had the bright idea of surprising his dad at work with lunch. Sweet, right? Little did I know, this innocent lunch date was about to set off a chain of events that would have me wishing I could hide under a rock for the next week. So there we were, munching on chicken tenders and fries in the car, with my husband. After lunch, we got the grand tour of his sheet metal shop. The kids were over the moon, probably imagining their dad as some sort of metal-bending superhero. As we were leaving, I spotted my husband walking back into the building. In a moment of playful affection, I honked the horn and called out, "Hey, nice butt, babe!" And that's when it happened. My 3-year-old, Ever the parrot, immediately echoed, "Nice butt, daddy." I froze. Oh no. But he wasn't done. He quickly followed up with, "Nice butt, mama." I tried to ignore it, hoping he'd forget about it if I didn't react. Oh, how naive I was. Fast forward to almost a week later. I'm in the living room, and I hear my son's voice coming from the open window. He's shouting to the whole neighborhood, "Nice butt, Papa." That's what he calls our elderly neighbor. "Nice butt, Mama." "Nice butt, baby." That's his little brother. I'm mortified. I'm pretty sure our neighbor thinks we're raising some sort of tiny pervert. I'm considering boarding up the windows and never leaving the house again. So here I am, hiding from the world, all because I wanted to compliment my husband's posterior. Let this be a lesson to all you parents out there. Be careful what you say around your kids. You never know when your innocent comment might turn into a neighborhood-wide embarrassment. And to our elderly neighbor, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. I promise we're working on our son's vocabulary. Maybe consider wearing baggier pants for a while. The day I learned to always check for baby monitors. You know those moments in life when you wish the ground would open up and swallow you whole? Well, let me tell you about the day I discovered a whole new level of embarrassment, courtesy of a baby monitor and my own forgetfulness. Picture this. It's early December, and my wife, our 8-month-old son, and I are living with my in-laws while our new house undergoes renovations. Not exactly a recipe for privacy, if you catch my drift. One Saturday, my wife decides to go shopping with her mother, taking our little bundle of joy with them. This leaves me and my father-in-law alone in the house, looking forward to watching some football in peace. With 20 minutes to spare before kickoff, I decide to grab a quick shower. Now, given the lack of, shall we say, private time lately, I thought I'd take advantage of the empty bedroom for a brief moment of personal relaxation. Nothing too scandalous, mind you, just a quick scroll through my phone and a bit of me time. Feeling refreshed and ready for some football, I head back downstairs. The living room is empty, which is odd, but I don't think much of it. The game starts, and about 10 minutes in, I hear a door close upstairs through the baby monitor. And that's when it hits me. The baby monitor, on the coffee table, at full volume. My heart stops. My face burns. My soul leaves my body. I realize with horror that my father-in-law had probably heard everything. And I mean everything. Now imagine 6 weeks of living under the same roof after that. 6 weeks of awkward silences, avoided eye contact, and the constant urge to disappear into thin air whenever my father-in-law entered the room. We finally moved into our new home, and let me tell you, I've never been so glad to have our own space. I'm pretty sure we won't be inviting the in-laws over for a while, and you can bet I'll be triple-checking for baby monitors from now on. The day my brother found my embarrassing recording. You know those moments when you wish you could just disappear? Well, let me tell you about the day I discovered a whole new level of embarrassment, courtesy of my own forgetfulness and my brother's curiosity. Picture this. It's a regular day, and my brother, 28, and I, 19, are watching a movie on my laptop. The battery's running low, so I get up to fetch the charger. No big deal, right? Wrong. In those few moments I'm gone, my brother decides it would be fun to snoop around my laptop. Now, normally, this wouldn't be a problem. What's the worst he could find? Some embarrassing selfies? A cringy diary entry? Oh, how I wish it was just that. You see, a while back, I had made a rather personal audio recording for my ex-boyfriend. And guess what? I had completely forgotten to delete it. Of all the things my brother could have stumbled upon, it had to be that. I walk back into the room, charger in hand, and suddenly I hear it. My own voice, sounding very, let's just say, not how a brother wants to hear his sister sound. Ever. My face goes from normal to ghost white to tomato red in about 2 seconds flat. I'm pretty sure I set a new world record for the fastest color change by a human face. My brother, bless him, stops the recording as soon as he realizes what it is. But the damage is done. The awkwardness in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. We sit there in silence for what feels like an eternity. Finally, my brother, probably desperate to pretend this never happened, asks if we should continue watching the movie. I nod, not trusting myself to speak without my voice cracking from embarrassment. We finished the movie in silence, but I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in it. All I could think about was how I was going to face my brother ever again. Poor guy probably thought he'd find some funny pictures of me or something. Instead, he got an audio experience that I'm sure he wishes he could unhear. The day our dog decided to help with diaper duty. Let me tell you about the day I learned that sometimes man's best friend can be a little too helpful. It all started on what seemed like a normal afternoon of daddy duty with my 4-month-old son. Picture this. I'm holding my little guy, feeling like I've got this parenting thing down pat. Suddenly, I feel something warm and, well, let's just say unpleasant. My son had managed to produce what can only be described as a diaper explosion. We're talking full-on, up the back, seeping through clothes kind of situation. Being the hands-on dad that I am, I sprang into action. I laid him down on the changing mat in the den. Our trusty 8-year-old golden retriever mix lounging nearby. No big deal, right? I got the messy onesie off without too much collateral damage and started the cleanup process. Now, any parent knows that a diaper blowout requires military-grade logistics. I'd cleaned up the back, but as I prepared to tackle the front, I realized I was out of diapers. Rookie mistake, I know. So I did what any sensible parent would do. I made a mad dash to the hallway closet to raid the diaper bag. I was gone for maybe 15 seconds. That's it. When I returned, everything looked normal at first glance. But as I knelt down to continue my cleanup operation, I noticed something odd. The mess I'd left behind was gone. Vanished. Like it had never existed. That's when it hit me. I turned to look at our dog, who was smacking his lips and looking mighty pleased with himself. This furry traitor had decided to help with the cleanup in the most horrifying way possible. I didn't know whether to be grossed out or impressed by his efficiency. I mean, he did do my job for me, right? Talk about teamwork. So, there you have it. The day I learned that sometimes, when you least expect it, your dog might decide to pitch in with childcare. Just maybe not in the way you'd hope. Let this be a lesson to all you parents out there. Never underestimate the helpfulness of your pets. And always, always keep spare diapers within arm's reach. Trust me, your future self and your dog's digestive system will thank you.